I think on this channel that I have two types of fans. I have people who like all the really out there black and death metal stuff that I talk about, and then I have the people who like Meshuggah. I have to apologize to the first group because I've been on a real Meshuggah kick lately, and I wasn't planning on doing this video, but this new single came out, and the power of Haka has compelled me to try to understand its last riff. And that insane voice in my head that ensures that I will never know peace told me that I have to do it as quickly as possible. This track is just so good, isn't it? It's got this kind of evil death metal feel that I haven't heard from Meshuggah in a while, and it refuses to stop slapping. But obviously I don't normally drop everything and make a video about every good new track that comes out. I'd certainly have my hands full with the new Animals as Leaders album if that was the case. The thing about this one is that its last riff has also rhythmically bamboozled me, and because it's a Meshuggah song, it feels like something that I'm well equipped to solve. So let's try to solve it, whatever that means. One of the main trends that I've noticed in Meshuggah's music in the last few albums is that they seem to be getting less and less explicit about the beat. There are more and more sections where the cymbals aren't spoon-feeding the tactus to you. Some of these hidden tactus sections are harder to latch onto than others, and I think these last two thirsty riffs are about as difficult as they get. First, there's this transitional section before the last riff. The drums are just following the guitar riff, and the riff does not make it easy at all to feel the tactus. This is because there are two different rates that the guitar notes move at. There's this one, and then there's this one. And the thing is, neither of them is the beat. And what's more, the two layers are not at all easy to relate to each other. If you have a very sharp ear, you've probably figured out that the first of those is quarter note triplets and the other is dotted quarter notes. We can't really relate them to each other without finding the hidden beat that they're both derived from. That beat is this. So why is this so hard to hear? The main reason, I think, is that triplets and dotted rhythms are like oil and water. They don't nest nicely with each other, even if in terms of absolute durations, they're pretty close to each other. Because of this, they kind of implicate different rhythmic worlds. The music theorist Richard Cohn has used what he calls ski hill graphs to visualize these different types of worlds. Another way of thinking about it is that in terms of absolute values, a dotted quarter note is in a 4:9 ratio to quarter note triplets at the same tempo. That is, 4 dotted quarter notes take up the same amount of time as 9 quarter note triplets. I have a working hypothesis that most people's rhythmic ears are barely very good with 2:1 and 4:1 and 3:1 ratios. Most musicians are good at those and also probably good with 3:2 and 2:3 ratios. And then the really out there rhythmic people dig into and get really comfortable with the 5:2 and the 7:2 ratios and all of those. But these 4:9 ratios quickly get outside of the realm of what's comfortable for most people, I would imagine. Of course, the trick is in the hidden tactus, which is in a 3:2 ratio to the dotted quarter notes and a 2:3 ratio to the quarter note triplets. So both of those relations are manageable if you can keep this hidden tactus in mind to link them. But when you're confronted with music with both triplets and dotted rhythms that hides this linking tactus, or it's hard to hear it or you're not tuning into it, things can get hopelessly slippery really quickly. And because there are basically only quarter note triplets and dotted quarter notes in this transitional riff with no timekeeping cymbal, it's really easy to get lost and to just hear this as a string of attacks with a chaotically changing tempo. But in fact, the tactus is there, and it's the same as what we've had in the rest of the song. And what's more, the section follows all the usual Meshuggah rules, including lasting for 16 measures of 4/4. Here's a side note for real nerds. if we're notating this in 4/4, as I generally do for Meshuggah's riffs, we will have to make tuplets cross the bar line, which is something that's notationally a little messy and performance-wise can be very tricky to feel. As I've said, it's hard to even hear the tactus here, and I think that imagining or hearing the 4/4 meter opens even more wormy cans because of these sorts of little tricky things. Of course, it's not impossible to deal with this. Nothing is impossible, but it's all making it, conspiring to make it more difficult. This isn't the only time that they've mixed dotted rhythms and triplets in their music, though they haven't done it a whole lot. The only other example I can think of is in the verse riff from Clockworks, which, while it has its own set of things making it difficult, is at least made easier by the clear timekeeping symbol that pounds out the tactus and helps us relate the two types of durations to each other. So that's the transitional riff. So far, so good. But then we get blindsided by this absolute mammoth of an outro riff. I think the first time I was listening to this track, when it came back in after the floaty transitional stuff, I kind of breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that my troubles were gone and fortune was smiling upon me. However, my rhythmic difficulties were just beginning. So the second riff, like to put it kind of in broad terms, we get this really heavy chugging dotted thing. Bow, bum, bow, bum, 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 bow, bum, bow, bum. And then we get 6 different versions of this really fast, squiggly triplet thing. And back to that. The basic idea here is the same. We're mixing dotted and triplet values, except now it gets more complicated because we're also deriving various new values from these basic building blocks. Instead of just mixing dotted quarter notes with quarter note triplets, we have dotted quarter notes, dotted eighth notes, eighth note triplets, and quarter note triplets. And speaking of Clockworks, this last thirsty riff, like the very cool bridge from Clockworks, is a very abstract and difficult static and variable parts construction with growing variable parts. We get this static part, which is in the dotted rhythm territory. And the pitches change each time it comes back in a not entirely repetitive way, but the basic shape is something like this. And again, because the symbol is pretty faint in the mix, it's pretty easy to hear these as just half and quarter notes. But if you hear like that, you're going to be blindsided by the variable parts of the riff, which are built on these really complicated, non-repeating triplet rhythms. If you're going to have any chance of hearing those and staying on track when you're playing this, or just trying to follow along when listening, you're going to have to hang on to the actual tactus for dear life. So there are 6 rotations through the static and variable parts, with the variable parts growing longer each time, except for the 5th one where it's short again, because you just can't have clean patterns in Meshuggah. That would be too simple. I'm going to just go into the weirdest of these, which is the 4th one, I think, and do a kind of galaxy brain expanding levels of difficulty thing with it. The ending I'm talking about is this one. It's already pretty syncopated and tricky to hear on its own, I think. It has 3 different types of rhythmic values, it's pretty angular, etc. But then we need to remember that these are also triplets. That lends another pretty tricky offbeat feel to it. And then remember, it's also coming after a string of dotted eighth notes. We need to be able to find this triplet feel precisely in kind of flying in the face of this contradictory information that we are coming from. And then zooming out a little bit, we need to remember our place in this larger scheme of static and variable parts, where the pitches don't really follow a pattern and all of these endings are different from each other. And then finally, there's the background 4/4, which is counting out 32 measures in this section. We do get the snare to latch onto in this section, which makes it easier, and these levels of complication aren't really contradictory, they all kind of reinforce each other, but maybe this is a useful representation of the kind of layers of abstraction that are at play here. It's been said a million times in a million different ways, but it's really true that Meshuggah's music is cool on at least 2 levels. By the time this video hits your eyeballs, I estimate I will have spent between 12 and 15 hours of my life joyfully transcribing, learning, explaining, and making this nerdy video about rhythmic abstractions in these 2 short riffs. But, and this is definitely the more important level, it's also music that you can positively throw ass to borrow a turn of phrase that I really like from Pierce Jordan of Soul Glow. May we all prepare ourselves to hear the full album in the name of Haka, Hagstrom, Thorndal, Kidman, and Lovegren. Amen. See ya. bum 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 bum. Bam